No, well, it is what it is. I mean, technically, I could shrink it and then just stretch this over and do it like this. Okay, that'll work. After all, this is mostly a visual sort of thing. So, everything looking good. Says I'm live streaming. Best thing to do is check YouTube, make sure it comes up. Yeah, nope, it's up. So from there, alright. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the Ephemeral One, and welcome to something a little different. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been working on a novel on my own off and on. And I find that doing streams like this truly does help me stay focused and keep motivated. So, I understand if no one else will want to watch this stream. I understand if no one will want to join in. That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start. I'm going to start streaming as I write, and just my mental processes and how things go. I'm a writer. This is just what I enjoy doing. And I've always been hesitant to share my writing. So, but I need to get over that, and I need to start pushing myself to do better. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my current novel project, called The Eternal March. I'll read it through so that to bring you all up to speed, and then from there I'll start writing. So, just get myself a drink. It should go without saying, all work is copyrighted myself. If you have any questions about your own writing, feel free to ask, of course. I'll always be open to try and help out other writers. Or feel free to throw ideas, but I'm not going to guarantee I take anything because this story is one that I've been working on for a very long time. Over a decade, actually, in all various forms, I've been trying to write this story. Anyway. So, yeah. Without further ado, I'll be reading it out loud as a form of editing, too. So, I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 0. Lysara's Vulgar Incitements. Aggravation I had never known soaked into my fist. Even the sound of my own steps had grown irritating. I struggled to tear my gaze away from the 12 annoyances lining the back wall. Each one of those black boxes remained still and emitted only the dull hum of the power I had personally vested in them. I breathed wordlessly to myself. You're a goddess. You've breathed life into countless children from nothingness, faced whole armies that trembled at your name and cowed by your sheer presence. You've torn worlds asunder and rebuilt it with patience that lesser beings couldn't imagine. My clenched fist struck out on its own and slammed into the lid of the closest annoyance. It was a box that was larger than the 10 others. I hissed. Yet somehow, waiting for this one to finish pulling itself together is giving me more anxiety than I thought possible. A soft clapping stole my attention away for a moment. Each slap of flesh offered a stark reminder that my undesired guests were watching me. The clapping was slow and mocking. Despite my best efforts, I shot the twins a furious glance. Both pale-skinned beings were wrapped in loose black robes. A sword belt hung loosely at the left one's hip. His grasp rested on the sword's handle after he'd finished his mocking clasps. Their rasping chuckles reminded me of the pained phantoms that populated Thanatos' homeland. He chided, "What unique and interesting ritual methods. I must remember to incorporate more salt into my own rituals." "Now, brother," spoke the more effeminate of the pair. His long hair was pushed aside with one hand as Hypnos placed the other on his brother's forearm. His unfocused amber eyes made him seem blind, but he looked at me when he sued. "We do not fully comprehend her methods. Perhaps she was imbuing it with her blessing to hurry this along." Ignoring their jeers at my outburst, I placed my palm against the smooth surface of the box. Letting my awareness expand, the carefully etched runes I'd cut on the inside of the box started to shine. Cocooned in the marks was a ball of energy. Each one of the 12 boxes looked exactly the same on the outside. However, each ball swirled and shifted colors as their spirits and souls synchronized with their new form. Some balls had begun to form limbs and were gaining definition, the final step before full manifestation. Then my view expanded to show my current form standing there. I'd always enjoyed the simplicity of my elf-like form. 4 strong limbs with hair the color of mud, eyes that sparkled like cut emeralds in the midday light. I was no frail maiden, and tended towards a simple apron over comfortable clothing. My subdued clothing clashed with all 3 of my guests. Each of the silver-eyed twins wore flowing black garb adorned with silver trinkets, marking their stations. Thanatos had highlights of dark blue at the edges of his robe, where his sibling affected a deep purple. Though both paled, in more ways than one, to the woman silently drinking tea in a corner opposite them. Lady Tsukuyomi kept a visible halo behind her that reflected off the gold embroidered in her white dress. Precious gems studded her waist strap, and crescent-shaped earrings crescent-shaped earrings tinkled musically with every bob of her head. Folded perfectly beneath her was the red triangular carpet. Aside from her gaudy taste, I had to grant that she was also a master of the unspoken declaration. It was clear from her face that she disapproved of my outburst, but she kept the large silver cup that seemed to endlessly refill with tea to her lips. They didn't approve. So what? They were in my domain, and this was my servant. They had vested interests, but this was the result of my work. A second leg extended out from the core in the middle box. Their ebony, smooth surface grew warmer. My anxiety instantly metamorphosed to excitement. The first arm stretched out from the center box. As the second arm reached out, the head popped into place as well. Heat swelled and washed over me. Reaching out my palm, I pressed it to the smooth stone. As the legs stretched out, steam rose from my contact with the box. My voice shook the room as I declared, "I am Lysara, goddess of the 4 eternal elements. Hear me and accept my welcome. Reflim Soregion." More smoke billowed in the underground chamber and blinded my physical eyes. Still, I could see the energy form of Reflim grow more defined with each passing second. Then the heat subsided. I bit my lip as the energy form dimmed and started to vanish. My heart skipped a beat. Did it fail? Then their newly formed hand extended forward towards mine. Reflim's silver eyes looked at me, each corner of their mouth pulled back to reveal a curtain of fangs, and my body shuddered. They were awake and aware. With a haggard step forward, I watched Reflim limp out before rising to stand tall, their statuesque 7-foot figure over my own. I rested my palm against the scaled back of their hand to offer support. Newly reborn, Reflim greeted me. Reflim Sorgian is born anew, and I thank you for your kindness, Lady Lasara. As you can see, they will all be very weak after being reborn. I turned my gaze back to my guests, Tsukiyomi's face now hidden fully behind the cup, as the twins both seemed to leer at Reflim's naked form. I coughed politely as I could manage. I need to perform an examination and technical analysis, so if you all will be so kind as to depart so I may do so in peace. This finally cowed the group as I guided Reflim to sit on the stone slab in the middle of the chamber. I stood facing Reflim as we waited for the others to part. I mindlessly tapped their joints and moved their limbs, their musculature well defined. The instant the door shut, Reflim inquired in a soft voice, "So, what's today's shitstorm?" Never change, Reflim. I let out a sigh of relief. The flippancy was a sign that everything had truly gone well. Taking my hand in their grasp, I began bringing it to their heart. I looked up into those cunning silver eyes. After a heartbeat, I explained. You've already noticed this isn't the body I prepared for you, I take it? Reflim nodded and looked down at their palm. Closing their fist, their eyes then turned back to me. Indeed, this body feels fine, but nowhere near as strong as a dragon hybrid should be. Because I had to make your body and everyone else's in a rush. Something has gone very wrong, I admitted, as I sincerely checked their limbs. Their scales had blended with their softer flesh and didn't inhibit any normal range of motion. Reflim heaved a sigh, and I summoned a ball of water with a flick of my wrist. They drank quickly and let out a sigh. I explained as they drank. The world you knew, Tosidek, was surrounded by a shield roughly a year ago at this point. The shield repels any divine entity and ejected all associated servants. We've had no way to get back in there since. I see. This hardly seems to be something unique to get you stressed about. Your domain consists of what, 12 solar systems, and not including Tosidek? Reflim inquired and brought a finger to their chin. I blinked several times, realizing I'd never specified how far my personal domains extended to them, but somehow this being had learned it? Another mystery for another day. Ignoring their question, I explained, the problem is Tosidek is a planetary byway that acts as a pact between myself, Tsukiyomi, Thanatos, and Hypnos. In the long term, we are planning on creating our own pantheon and basing it off of there. Ah, I see. So the others are going to drop the whole thing if Tosidek falls into some other force, Reflim surmised. Crossing their long legs, their gaze wandered to the ceiling. A bit worse than that, I'm afraid. They're planning to drop a meteor storm and smash whatever is generating the shield, then gather up their servants' souls and pretend the whole thing never happened. I snarled under my breath. After all, they all have pantheons to slink back to if they need to. And you don't. I see. So what's the plan? Since you and yours won't be affected by the shield, I want you to find, break the source, and bring whoever is responsible, no matter who it is, to us. Simple, right? Simple, Reflum scoffed before letting his shoulders droop low. Scour an entire world for a conspiracy that managed to thwart 4 deities and all their servants. Then undo it while capturing the mastermind. All in a body that was hastily put together and I imagine is my time limit. Truly, never change, Reflum. I couldn't help but feel pride as they surmised their situation so quickly. After a breath to calm myself, I clarified. The storm headed to Tosidic will take roughly 15 years to arrive. However, your bodies will likely only last 10 years at the most. Leaning back to rest their palms on the stone slab, Reflum rocked their heads side to side. After a moment's contemplation, they looked into my eyes. Another silent moment flickered past before they heaved a sigh with their whole body, their skin the color of drying mud, meshed with dark blue scales. Even for a rush job, I had to admire their androgynous form. It lacked much of what I'd achieved in their originally prepared body, but they'd be seductive to the common folk without trying. And payment? Reflum inquired. The 11 members of the Black Phoenix will use up the front part of the Divine Essence as part of your payment. I'll supply you with the equivalent of 1,500 gold pieces as the upfront part, plus an additional 1,000 per diem for the 10 years. If you only manage to break the shield, I'll grant you a second 1,500. Catching the mastermind will net you 2,000 from each of your employers. Wait. Reflum held up their soft hands to me. I went silent as their hands swung around the boxes lining the wall. They said, 11 feels way too many and not enough at the same time. Is that really everyone who accepted my offer? Oh, no. There's more, but I'm not telling you who. Those 11 are those who I felt would give you... Sorry. Would give you the best shot at completing this job. I beamed as I could almost hear the mental gears whir at the number of souls I'd prepared. You really do never play fair. So I won't know who all followed me until I complete this job, and then you'll just subtract the cost of their bodies from my payment. Reflum groaned and buried their sharp features into their palms. I watched them give a muffled scream into their digits. Sucking in a breath, Reflum then looked at me. Obviously I'm doing this, so one final question remains. Do we have any intel on who, how, and what I'm looking for? Nope, there's too many possibilities. Fucking perfect. Well, at least I'll be dead before the meteors arrive. They rose and then collapsed back down onto the slab. I placed a hand on their shoulder and smiled. After a long moment, Reflum closed their eyes. I ran my fingers through their oily black hair. It's not that bad. You've accomplished harder tasks. I'm just sorry I couldn't start your second life on a happier note. Still, you're here, and even if you somehow fail, this won't be the end of us. We're used to taking the harder path anyway. True. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move each of them into a private room. You can wake them up one by one after you get to eat and get dressed. Sound good? I explained as I rested my forehead against Reflum's. Their breathing evened out slowly. Reflum murmured, Yeah, just another shitstorm to sort out. Trust me, you'll want the bonus on this job. It'll be perfect just for you, I promise. I'll hold you to that, my lady. Chapter 1. A plethora of firsts and seconds. Yeah, because that's one thing. Yeah, let's move the chapters. And add an extra space. There we go. Okay. Seated on a thickly cushioned couch, Reflum stared at the large four-poster bed in the center of the room. Twice over, any attempts to sleep had failed. It had been pitch black outside the window when they descended up from the basement on the second floor of Lusara's manor. A low table was decorated with colorful fruits. Biting into a juicy crimson fruit, they watched as the first rays of dawn peeked over the edge of the world. Placing the fruit back onto the table, Reflem lifted themselves upright by digging their long fingers into the armrests. With a soft chuckle, they said to no one, "Suppose it's time to ruin everyone's day." Twin, overflowing bookshelves sat next to the door. Swinging it open, a golden plate read Reflem Sorlegian on either side. The long, windowless hallway beyond was lit by lanterns hung from the ceilings before each door. A simple rug depicting a multicolored serpent with feathered wings ran the length of the hallway. Scanning the doors, Reflem snapped their fingers. Aha! It only took a heartbeat for their long legs to carry them to a new room. Decorated almost identically to Reflem's room, the only difference was a dresser on the opposite side of the room. The difference was the dresser on the side of the room. Another difference was the two figures lying in each other's arms in the bed. The taller elven woman laid in what had darkly tanned skin with a trio of scars across her face. Her skin had the weathered texture of old leather, despite how young she looked. Cradled in the first woman's arms was a smaller woman with green skin, her fair face turned upwards towards the first. Reflem stared at the picturesque moment in silence. Then, raising an arm, they began to incant. Under the name of Reflem Sorlegian, I beckon you. Klasha, Telu, Ikchu. Particles of light began to dance around the pair. Small orbs of multicolored light swayed and then bounced. Then, all at once, the light vanished. Both women groaned and rolled one way, then another. Reflem sucked in a breath, their chests swelling, before letting out a draconic roar. "Sweet pea, throw the dragon out," the taller woman groaned. The shorter one sat up and held up a hand. A burst of wind bounced off Reflem. After a moment, her eyes widened. The green woman looked at her hand and then to the taller woman, then to Reflem. Her eyes snapping all around before she screamed. "What is it, Sweet Pea?" "Tishril, it's really you!" bellowed the shorter woman, wrapping her arms around the taller one. Tishril's eyes then opened wide. Returning the embrace, the two clung to each other for a long moment before their mouths met. Tishril's eyes narrowed as she pushed the smaller woman back. Her gaze locked on the cushioned seat Reflem now rested on. With a wave of their hand towards the pair, Reflem suggested, "Oh, please, go on. I'll enjoy the show if you two feel the need." "Astral? Sweet Pea? Permission to kill." "Not right now." Astral stroked her lover's glare. Lover's glaring. Lover's cheek affectionately as she turned to face Reflem. Clutching the sheets to herself, the small woman inquired, "We're really back from the dead? That must mean you're Reflem Sorlegian, correct?" "Yes, there are 12 of us total right now," Reflem nodded. Hard to believe. The last thing I remember is that battlefield. I'd saved our recruits from an ambush by some pirates. I was so busy worrying about their cannons that their arrows caught me in the chest. Water began to fill Astral's green eyes. Clutching Tishral's hand for support, I saw you by my side, then things were just gone. No pain, no bliss, nothing but emptiness. Somewhere in that darkness, you both agreed to my offer to live again and by my side. Thank you for that. Reflum stood up and bowed to the women. Their soft lips pursed before they spoke. Now, eat something, get dressed, and please head downstairs. I'll be awakening everyone and explaining the situation once everyone's ready. It might take a while, so feel free to sneak in a few rounds if you feel the need. Tishral clicked her tongue and sighed. As much as I want to, I know my sweet pea too well. Astral lowered her head. A faint blush came to her cheeks as Tishral ran her nimble fingers through the deep black hair of Astral. The small woman looked at Reflum in the eyes. I'll perform the record keeping for the Black Phoenix as I did for the Blue, so let me get dressed and I'll join you in awakening the others. As you wish. I'll await you outside. Reflum gracefully bowed at the waist before turning on their heel to walk back outside. Reflum had begun stretching their lean form as Astral stepped out, now dressed in a pair of black pants that had small packs that hung from the belt around the waist. Her simple dark blue shirt was embroidered with small gems along the hems. Reflum smiled. It looks good on you. Of course it does, Tishral scoffed, stepping out of the room. Her loose-hanging short-sleeved shirt had the plunging neckline to her navel, offering a view of the many scars that crisscrossed her flesh. Sliding one hand into the pocket of her matching pants and the others around Astral's shoulders, my sweet pea is the most beautiful creature in the universe. And people wonder why love is treated as a sickness in some places, Reflum chuckled to themselves, just loud enough for the pair to hear. Tishral merely clicked her tongue as they were led by Reflum to the next door. Their hand lingered just under the nameplate. Reflum simply stood there motionless. What's wrong? Astral inquired as she floated up into the air. Her clothing fluttered from the magic she used to ascend high enough to read the golden lettering. Placing a finger to her soft cheek, Astral inquired. Calrin? The company's undertaker, who the commander gifted a whole island to herself, right? Yeah. Reflum stammered for a moment before pressing slowly on the door. The wood groaned as the three figures stepped inside. Once more, a similar room to the previous one, laid on the bed was a tall, lean woman with golden yellow scales mixed with pale skin. Reflum's steps shook with every... Reflum's uneasy pace shook with every step. The couple watched as Reflum knelt down and wrapped one hand in her of the woman's hands in both of their own. Reflum tried to speak several times, but got choked up. After a deep breath, they managed to squeak out, Under the name of Reflum Sorgian, I beckon you. Krasha Teru Ikthu. Swirling orbs of blackest pitch manifested around the room. Each swirling ball swelled and then shrank into nothingness. The woman yawned slowly, opening her yawned and slowly opened her eyes. Brilliant red pupils were split down the middle with a black streak. Reflum's own silver gaze met the newly awakened. Before anyone else could speak, the woman pulled Reflum into a tight hug. Reflum coughed and then sputtered as the woman rocked them side to side exuberantly. Sorry, the woman blushed, and relaxed her grip enough to let the captive breathe but not allow them to escape. She then pulled Rephilim into a kiss, their tongues visibly caught in an intimate embrace. Astral coughed politely. "Welcome back to the world of the living, Calren." Calren broke their embrace to look past Rephilim to the pair. Licking her lips, she then brought a finger to them, pointing at each of the guests. "You're the secretary, Astral, and her bodyguard Tishril, right?" "Well, former secretary," Astral shrugged. "Ah, true. Now, would you both pardon us for a moment? I need to speak to Rephilim alone." The final word taken on an edge of malice. Both women nodded quietly and clicked the door behind them. Rephilim squeaked as Calren's hand moved to grip either side of their head and held them in place for a probing kiss. The embrace lasted until neither could breathe. Releasing Rephilim with a gasp, Calren smiled. Licking her lips once more, Calren looked at her stunned partner. "You made me wait far too long. I hope you realize. I can never truly repay your patience. Thank you so much for keeping everyone's souls safe." Rephilim kept their gaze low. Taking Rephilim by the chin, Calren examined their face. "Indeed, but you will repay me with your body and labor, won't you?" "Yes, my mate." "Good. Now go deal with the others. You haven't earned the right to see my bare flesh yet." Rephilim numbly stood up and walked out of the room. As soon as they stepped out to see the grinning women, Rephilim slapped their palms to their face. Shaking themselves out of the stupor, Rephilim announced boldly, "Now that the one I dreaded most is out of the way, onwards!" "Oh, no you don't." Astral stepped on air to press her small palms to Rephilim's broad chest. She floated between them and the next door. Folding her arms, and the small woman demanded, "I need to know how you were connected with that woman. No one ever really saw her aside from funerals, so it was hard to find out anything about her." Astral's emerald eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Okay." Rephilim sighed and leaned against the wall next to the door. With a sigh, they explained. "You two worked for the Blue Phoenix mercenaries under my brother Rusala. I'm sure you remember the rumors of the Black Phoenix Company, or the Phoenix's shadow, floating around. Calren was one of the members." Okay, that makes some sense. And all of us who are reborn will be Black Phoenix as well. So then, who is she to you?" "The exact circumstances will be too hard to explain right now. But she is my mate, in the draconic sense." Astral's hands clutched her mouth as she squealed. Tishril placed a hand on her floating partner. "What's the big deal, Sweet Pea? Isn't that another name for a lover?" "Dragons don't partner beyond the need for procreation and satisfaction, usually. A dragon's mate is literally an exchange of a part of their souls, so they know each other's fate is shared. It's so romantic, so... That's why she got a whole island?" "No, she got a whole island because she's a natural-born necromancer on par with me, and tends to kill the living and raise the dead by accident. So rather than risk it scaring everyone, we kept her separate." Rephilim smiled. Astral and Tishril looked at each other in stunned silence as Rephilim pushed past them into the room beyond. Tishril stammered, "They're joking, right?" "No idea. The rumors always said the Black Phoenix was made up of monsters too dangerous for the Blue Phoenix. And, well, the commander never brought it up." Both women followed Rephilim into the new room. Astral craned her neck as she floated by to read the plate aloud. "Dias Catem. Under the name of Rephilim Soragian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teru Iktru." Rephilim waved their hand across the figure laying in the bed. Multicolored orbs manifested, dancing and bobbing before popping. Splayed out on the bed was a large man with a well-built figure. His dirty blonde tresses covered his eyes. Before opening his eyes, the man sat up, drawing one knee to rest against. A smile revealed his perfect teeth and brilliant orange eyes. The man spoke confidently. "And a good morning to you, Reflin. How are you feeling, Diaz?" "Pretty good. Our Lady has already kept me informed of the situation. I look forward to seeing you step out of the commander's shadow." "Excellent. Then take your time and join us downstairs when you're ready. I want to explain everyone our plans once they're all awake." Diaz reached out a strong hand and drew some of Reflem's black hair to his full lips. Kissing the hair, he whispered sensually, loud enough for the ladies to hear, "Consider me at your leisure and pleasure whenever you desire." "Thank you, Diaz. I will see you downstairs." Reflem stood up and turned on their heel. Diaz waved towards Astral with a smile. "It'll be nice to work with you again, Astral." "Work with me again? I don't recognize you," Astral muttered. Tishrel snickered. "Too bad, Playboy. This one is taken, and so is Reflem." "For now," Diaz smiled. His form rippled like haze rising off the desert. Then a new man was sitting on the bed. His soft, tender features and brown hair are all different, but the perfect smile remains. Another moment, and a staggering beauty with a voluptuous chest drew a hand along her generous curves. Tishrel grabbed Astral by the belt and drew her outside. Reflem chuckled. "You probably knew Diaz as a scout for the Blue Phoenix. He was actually a member of the Black Phoenix, one of our best infiltrators." "What is he actually?" Tishrel demanded angrily. Reflem cocked their head to the side. "If you mean species, he's a changeling, a type of fae that's left behind and swapped for another species. They're usually unwanted children who grow outside the Fae courts and adapt to the world." "That sounds horrible," Astral muttered. Reflem chuckled. "You'll have to get a story one day from him, and I'll be curious to hear what you think after that." Leading the pair further down the hall, Reflem stood between two doors. "Are Ted Longwheel and Mask?" Tishrel read aloud. She pointed to the second door and leaned in. "I'm a bit rusty with my drow. This is Mask, right?" "A more literal translation would be the one with many faces." Astral floated up to the letters. With a satisfied nod, she boasted, "Mask would be the common usage due to its term for actors on the stages of Del Shara." A single finger of Tishrel rested on Astral's lips, silencing her. The small woman blushed as Reflem entered the room. Thick curtains hung in the window, blocking almost all the light. A fireplace cast long shadows on the drawn curtains of the bed. "Under the name of Reflem Sovigian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teru, Iktulu," Reflem chanted. After a silent moment, a raspy voice confirmed. "I am awake. Are you there, Reflem?" "I am." "Thank you for keeping your word and continuing our contract." "It is my pleasure. Take some time to rest, and when you're ready, please join us downstairs. We've got another job lined up already." "Excellent." Reflem ushered the ladies out with them. They quietly added, "Any question about Mask will have to be addressed by themselves. They're one of my most trusted allies, and I won't speak a word that might betray their desires." Without hesitation, Reflem entered the opposite chamber. Though similarly darkened, crystal-shaped lamps hung from the ceiling. The curtains on the bed were drawn to show a man with ashen skin and brilliantly white hair asleep. Without hesitation, Reflem entered into the opposite chamber. Though similarly dark... Oh, I lost my spot. Sorry. Reaching out to rest their hand on the back of our Ted's hand, Reflem muttered, Under the name of Reflem Sorgian, I beckon you. Kraha, Teru Iktru. Nothing about the room changed, but the man simply opened his eyes. He began to speak to himself. Unfamiliar location. No noticeable remnants of intoxication or other drugs. Unfamiliar Dracel, unfamiliar elf, unfamiliar floating goblin. Last memory, experiment 1274. Testing new gem formation technique. Compression went out of control. You died in the ensuing explosion, yes, Reflem confirmed. The man sat up, his movements stiff. Though his lips continued to move, no words escaped him. After a moment, Astral coughed politely. And to correct you, I am a Jinni, not a goblin. Ah, I see, right, the ears. Goblins have longer, pointed ears to enable greater hearing at a further range. Still a lesser derivative of their elven cousins. Would that make you Rusala Kalten's secretary, Astral? Then the woman behind you would be Tishril, former assassin turned sailor and bodyguard. Considering both of you died well before my own death, yet you stand here, there I am either in an afterlife, or this is the third individual is Reflem Sorgian, meaning I've been reborn. Arted surmised in a constant spew of speech, offering no one any time to interject. It is indeed the second one, Reflem nodded. Strange then that we're not in Del Shira. Likely this means that something has happened to the original plans. That is unfortunate, as I left many of my tools, Arted began to speak, but was silenced by a finger pressed to his lips. Reflem smiled sweetly. I'll explain everything once we have everyone awake and assembled downstairs. All right? Understood. Good, so get dressed and get ready. There's probably some food downstairs to make sure you eat. So make sure you eat and I don't have to find you collapsed on the floor again. That has only happened 7 times if my memory hasn't been altered. Arted argued. Reflem winked. Which is 7 times too many. The trio departed the room and continued towards the stairs at the end. In silence, Reflem hurried to the next bedchamber. Gold, silver, and gems adorned every piece of furniture. Even the heavy curtains had depictions of submissive slaves with ruby eyes inlaid into it. Throwing aside the veil of the bed, Reflem snorted as a single figure lay spread out under the rich, shimmering crimson sheets. Reflem admitted aloud, his tastes never get any better. Oh well. Under the name of Reflem Sorgian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teru Iktru. Cloudy crimson drops manifested throughout the room. They vanished one by one into mist. As the final one departed, the drow male swung his fist at Reflem, lunging out of the bed, wrapping his strong arms around their throat. The man raised his fist to slam against Reflem's face. Tishril calmly grabbed the man's arm by the wrist. Tishril snarled, You don't want to do that, Kalain. And why not? The man snarled, showing his sharp teeth as he seethed in response. Tishril simply nodded, her head behind. Jerked her head. That's the phrase I'm looking for. Her head behind Kalain. The man's eyes widened as he saw several javelins of water hovering behind him. Reflem clicked their tongue. Now why'd you have to go and ruin my fun? 'Cause there was one time Kalain's unit saved me after a botched mission. Now we're even. Tishril released Kalain's arm. The drow man relaxed and ran a hand through his deep purple hair. Poking through the hair were 2 stout horns extending from his temples and curving back. Kalain looked at Tishril, from Tishril to Reflem, and slumped forward. Shit, I really did get the worst option out of Who's Got My Soul, didn't I? Reflem's lips peeled back in a genuine malicious smile. Each sharp fang interlocked perfectly. Kalain stood up slowly and offered Reflum a hand back to their feet. The drow let out a sigh as he looked across the room. You really are Reflum Sorgian, huh? It's nice to finally speak face to face. The pleasure is all yours. Mine was had in devouring everyone else you'd promised your soul to. Reflum licked their lips for emphasis. Kalain's eyes narrowed. You'll have time to figure out if I'm lying later. For now, while I'm going around doing the wake-up calls, get dressed and meet everyone downstairs, all right? Reflum spoke condescendingly. Kalain nodded. As Reflum turned to leave, Kalain grabbed their arm. After a breath, he asked, Give me proof to believe it's you. Pretender King Agaddon never sat on his throne happily because of us, Reflum spoke sweetly. Kalain's grip relaxed and he let go. Turning towards the wardrobe, he began to assess the clothing within and ignored the others. As Reflum left the room, Astral muttered to herself, I really never understood how he wasn't kicked out of the company. Just as exceptions prove the rule, or... Reflum paused in the middle of the hallway as Tishril closed the door behind them. Placing a finger on their chin, in thought, Reflum nodded. A better way to put it might be that everyone needs an example of what not to do. Kalain serves that purpose wonderfully, and he's aware enough of it to play the role without losing perspective. Still, it doesn't seem right, Astral muttered. Reflum snapped their fingers and the sound of water hitting the floor mixed with a loud curse. Reflum chuckled. Plus, he's fun to torture. Tishril walked over to the door opposite Kalain's. Her aqua eyes widened when she pointed to the name excitedly. Reflum placed a hand to their face as Astral read aloud. Mihail the Pirate Queen, self-proclaimed. Wow, I really didn't expect her, Astral admitted. Reflum walked inside the chamber. Maps and sailing equipment lined much of the room. Splayed out in an undignified state was Mihail, her naked body twitching in its sleep. Mihail's wild red hair, I don't know why it said haircut, just past her round ears. Oh, hair cut off just past her round ears, and what parts of her didn't have blemishes or bore old scars or freckles. On the opposite side of the bed, she'd apparently flung the top sheet into a heap in the back. Raising a hand into the air, Reflum incanted. Under the name of Reflum Sorgian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teruik too. Mihail's pale skin flushed luminescent lines and traveled from her head down to her toes. With a heady yawn, Mihail rose up, looking at her three guests. She knuckled one eye as she demanded, "That'll be 4 silver for seeing me privates, and another gold to get me to believe you ain't done nothing to me while I slept." Don't care what you think happened, Reflum scoffed and turned away to look at one of the mops on the wall. Tishril stepped closer. As Mihail's brilliantly golden eyes swung towards the elf, they widened. Mihail's arms flung wide and embraced Tishril tightly. She bellowed, "Tishril, me favorite throat cutter! It's so good to see you again." Tishril returned the hug and smiled softly. "Yeah, been a long time. Though you might want to let me go, or my sweet pea might get jealous of a naked woman hugging hers." "Ah, you got a point," Mihail crooned as she released the taller woman. Fumbling over a dresser, she bent over to pull on some simple brown pants as she exclaimed, "And not a pirate alive that knows not a tempest, right?" Astral heaved a sigh. "True enough. Still, it is nice to see you again, Mihail." Donning a white shirt, Mihail smiled. "So who's the Giselle? I figured it was the commander who grabbed my soul." Reflum bowed at the waist. "I am Reflum Sorgian." "Go on, pull the other one." "What?" "Reflum wasn't real, just what the commander made up in his head for when he went batty." "No, I'm very much real." Can't be. I mean, the Phoenix's shadow was just a bunch of rumors to scare off the small blades from fucking up our contracts. And excuse the commander when he went batty and killed more than he was supposed to. Nice to know my cover stories held up nicely, Reflum chuckled, bringing a hand to their lips. Walking over to Mihail, their lithe form loomed over the shorter woman. Placing a hand on her shoulder, they whispered softly, "You better start believing in the Black Phoenix. You're one of us now." Mihail gulped. After several failed attempts to speak, she managed to bleat out to Tishril, Did you know they were real?" "No? No. But I was familiar with their same rumors as you. But considering some of the people I watched Reflum wake up earlier, I can't doubt they existed." Tishril nodded as she folded her arms across her chest. Reflum turned on their heel. "Anyway, there should be food ready for you downstairs, so after you've collected yourself, head down." Asriel floated in a seated position as the door closed behind the trio. As they drifted down to the final pair of doors before the stairs, she commented, "You know, for the fearsome reputation Mihail put out there, she seemed genuinely disturbed about the Black Phoenix. I don't recall him doing anything that unspeakable. Assassinations, kidnapping, information extraction. Pretty standard stuff." "Well, for one thing, Mihail's reputation was mostly just talk. She was a good smuggler, but that's about it. Truly vicious piracy she never really had the heart for," Tishril admitted. With a grin, Tishril flicked the tip of her ear. "In truth, I knew of the Black Phoenix through old connections from my days as an assassin. I always wondered why I never got invited, but I was happy to stay by your side, Sweet Pea. We didn't specifically cause we felt you were best in your position as Astral's bodyguard. She was a highly valued member of the Blue Phoenix, after all," Reflum explained. They halted between the last pair of doors. Standing there for a moment, they spun left and headed towards the door. Turning the hooked handle, the door opened with a reverent squeak of its hinges. Walking inside, the trio had to step around a plethora of bookshelves, each one loaded tightly with books, scrolls, or even loosely bound papers. A large overstuffed chair sat facing a fireplace, while a large bed with thick sheets ran along the opposite wall. Each post of the bed had crystals atop them, and the bed was a blonde woman. She laid on her side facing away from the group. Asriel read the plate on the door, repeating the name, Reneth. Reneth. I know who it is, but I don't recognize her. Under the name of Reflum Soagian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teru Iktru. Reflum spoke softly. Each of the crystals began to glow, shimmering streamers of lights that swayed and danced around the room. Illumination swelled and then faded to only normal sunlight streaming in through the window. The woman yawned and looked up at the three with stunning emerald eyes. Reneth leaned on one arm so that the covers highlighted her luscious form more than hid it. Reneth's delicate fingers pushed back her hair. In a slow, sensual tone, she spoke. Good morning. Nice to see you too, Reneth. Want to guess who I am? Reflum teased. Reneth reached out and slid her soft fingers along the sharp jaw, cooing softly. You're the one who saved me, and those I hold dear, my dear Reflum. No, that was my brother. I just nudged him. Reneth shook her heavy, dirty blonde hair as her fingers rested on Reflum's lips. She smiled. No, I could see the difference after you left. The commander became rather dull and lackluster when you were gone. So I know it was you that saved us, a debt I wish to repay in your service. As well as a chance to indulge in your favorite pastime, Reflum giggled, motioning towards the bookshelves that lined each wall. Asriel beamed as she continued to peruse the shelves one by one. Something I will definitely be joining you with. Oh, it's always better with more, after all. Ashro blinked and gasped. Oh, right, that's where I know you from. You ran the brothels and led the local Cubist coven. That I did in my past. But I'm not so young anymore, Reneth blinked as her voice trailed off. Looking down at her hands and then under the sheets, she murmured, Actually, that is a question. Do I keep adding years or start over? That'll be up to you, and if you'd like a second opinion, come meet everyone downstairs. I'd like to discuss our situation with everyone all at once. There should be food prepared. Rephilim nodded. Reneth took Rephlim's hand and kissed the back of it, and then again at the wrist. She looked up into the silver eyes. I look forward to comparing and collaborating with you extensively in the future. You needn't put on airs. You've always been a temptress without compare. You flatter me too much. Rephilim nodded and let the other pair out of the room. Ashro floated up to read the plaque on the door and immediately drifted to the floor. Curling up by the door, she muttered, Go ahead without me. I'm the last person they need to see. Tishrol hurried over and picked up her lover, holding her to her chest to read the nameplate aloud. Wira and Koshi. Oh, I see. What happened between you? Rephilim tilted their head. Tishrol tried to speak and fell silent. After a moment, Ashro spoke bluntly. I sent them on the job that got them both killed. It was supposed to be a simple scouting contract, and things went very wrong. And I got there too late. It's all my fault. Ashrol's small fist landed on Tishrol as she made frustrated blows. I understand if you want to stay here. It's fine. Rephilim gave Tishrol a meaningful nod and stepped inside. Rather than a bed, a large futon lay near a fireplace. Two men lay facing each other, one with hair the color of fresh blood and pale flesh. His soft, almost feminine features were only highlighted by the makeup around his eyes. Across from the first was a brunette man with a strong, square jaw. He seemed stern even while asleep. Rephilim raised a palm and spoke softly. Under the name Rephilim Sorgian, I beckon you. Krasha, Teru, Iktru. Flickering balls of fire danced through the air, some red, some blue. Others burned a darker hue, and a few colored green. The air grew warm, and the smell of ozone remained from the fires. Rephilim walked to the window and pushed it open to let the smell of fresh flowers rise from the garden below. By the time Rephilim turned back to the pair, both were sobbing. Tears stained their orange eyes, clutching at each other as they sobbed each other's name. Koshi, Koshi, sobbed the red-haired man. We're, cried the brunette. Rephilim watched silently as their lips held in a tight line. After several long minutes, Wira turned towards the window. Wiping his face on his bare forearm, Wira smiled. I'm sorry for this shameful display. Don't be. I take it you both died violently, and that is hard to deal with. Rephilim shook their head as they leaned against the windowsill. Koshi nodded. We got ambushed by a goblin army. They got Wira first, and I failed to escape. I never thought I'd... His voice trailing off into more tears. Rephilim waited quietly until both men managed to compose themselves. Wira took a deep breath before asking, What now? I'll explain everything to everyone at one time downstairs. Take some time to relax, and when you feel ready, come join us. There will be some familiar faces and some you won't be as familiar with. Rephilim smiled softly, then began to cross the sparsely furnished room. Wait, before you go, Would Astral be amongst those we'll be meeting? Koshi reached out and grabbed Reflum by the wrist. Reflum shuddered in a soft laugh. Yes, in fact, she's curled up right outside the door, scared to face you because she blames herself for your deaths. Koshi's eyes widened and he hastened over to the wardrobe. Grabbing a simple brown pants and a golden colored shirt, he hurried out the door. Wira was slower to dress, but still moved with urgency. Reflum followed the pair out of the room. Tishril still cradled her lover in her strong arms. Both men knelt down and pressed their heads to the floor. In unison they pleaded, "Please, forgive us, Astral. We disregarded your advice." What are you talking about? I failed to get all the information from the scouts. Astral tearfully objected. That wouldn't have mattered, Koshi admitted. We got overzealous and hunted the goblin leader. We were stupid. Forgive us. You fools. Astral spoke between sobs, taking both men by the head and pulled them to her chest. There's nothing to forgive. We all failed. Apologies flowed back and forth between all three. Others began to file out from their rooms and waved as they let the sobbing figures let out all their emotions. Tishril leaned over to Reflum to whisper. It was her distraction due to their deaths that caused our own. I'll aim to do better this time. We will all do better, because this time I'll be with you body and soul. Reflum gave the woman a reassuring squeeze of her shoulder before heading downstairs themselves. Wow, I actually have a bit of a headache from doing all this so far. Okay. Chapter 2. Sacrosanct Contracts. The long, curved table sat in the main foyer of the manor. Fruits, drinks, and fragrant breads all lined the top. Robed servants stood silently near the wide double-door entrance and the doors leading to the back of the manor. Each servant kept their hood up, and their gray robes hid much of their features. Different servants replaced the foods and drinks and foods as they were eaten. It was late morning by the time everyone had arrived from upstairs. They had taken seats prepared on the longer side of the curve. Small talk, shared memories were common with some, while others sat in stony contemplation. It was then Reflum rapped their knuckles against the wood, announcing, All right, I'd like to get this briefing started. This'll be the only mandatory one, I promise you. Reflums walked on their long legs around the table to stand in the center. Next to them, a much shorter brown-haired woman appeared in a blur. Reflum bowed at the waist before motioning to the woman. This is our employer and my lady Lasara, goddess of the four eternal elements. Every gathered soul stood and bowed. Lasara smiled and nodded imperially to the assembled souls. Reaching out, the image of an icy stone appeared to hover above the table. She spoke neutrally. This pocket dimension we're currently in is located here within this comet. It's on its way to Tosidic, your homeworld. It shall take 2 more weeks to arrive. So then the light we see outside? Tishril inquired, pointing at one of the many high windows in the hall. Lasara twisted her hand to shift the floating image to a planet with 2 large continents set by a sea that was dotted with many islands. A translucent orb of orange surrounded the planet. She continued, A courtesy of mine to help you all mark time until your arrival. You see, roughly 2 years ago, a shield was erected around Tosidic. Oh, I wrote 2 years. Only meant a year. A year ago, a shield was erected around Tusidic. This unique barrier repels any divine energy or being. What happened to those who were there? Artet inquired, before taking a sip of the dark juice in his cup. Mostly just expelled to other realms associated with their deity. Since then, neither myself nor any of the other deities involved on Tusidic have been able to reach anyone on the planet. So I'll be sending you all, who I believe trustworthy, to bring it down and capture whoever is responsible for that. Lysara closed her hand to dismiss the image. Reflum stepped forward. I will take care of the task, so if anyone wants to back out of it, I will understand. Why? Reneth asked, tilting her head to the side. Reflum nodded. Because I didn't offer you all a second life, so... Not that! Reneth cut Reflum off and stood up. Why aren't you telling us everything? I can smell it. There's a lot you're not saying. I want the whole truth. Cowrin stood up and walked with long, purposeful steps. The room grew still as her dress swayed with every step. The skeletons on her robe danced back and forth as she walked up to Reflum. Though shorter by head and shoulders, Cowrin stared into Reflum's silver eyes. He spoke bluntly. Well, what is the truth? Cowrin's hand lashed out, striking Reflum across the face. The force of the blow sent them skidding along the floor. Cowrin demanded, The truth! Spitting out some blood, Reflum sat up. Looking up at their allies, they said, These bodies we're all in, they've got a 10-year lifespan at best. Why? Maharold stared down at her trembling hands. Lysara spoke flatly. Because they were the best I could do in such short time. Whether you realize it or not, each of you is a very complex creature with a body that would accept your souls was no simple task. Whether it's devil tank, divine vestiges, or other abilities, each of you would have been required an expensive, customized new body. Climbing to their feet, Reflum let out a sigh. So yes, I want to spare you all the problems of this job. I will do it myself, so if you all want to focus on enjoying your second lives, you all... Cowrin lunged forward with a swipe of her sharp nails, painted silver. This time Reflum stepped to the side. A sweep of Cowrin's legs sent Reflum stumbling backwards. Catching themselves before toppling over, Reflum then caught a follow-up punch. Reflum snarled and struggled to push the smaller woman's fist back. You all suffered greatly because of my greed in the past. I wanted to give you all a second chance. Cowrin drew her fist back and brought her knee to Reflum's stomach. Tossing Reflum to the ground, and she spit before speaking. Get this through your thick skull, Reflum Sorgian. We're not fragile creatures or children you need to do the labor for. We're not the soft creatures you've dealt with. Each of us is here by our own volition. Tangling her small fingers into Reflum's black hair, she pulled their head up and snarled, So, tell us the truth! Fine. Fine! Cowrin's grip loosened and she took a step back to let Reflum climb to their feet again. Brushing off their simple blue pants, Reflum looked around the expectant room. Nodding towards Lysara, Reflum began. These bodies will only last 10 years at best, and should we not succeed in removing the barrier before our bodies fall apart, asteroids will obliterate all life on Tusidic. Is control of our planet so critical that a loss of control necessitates killing everyone? Asriel demanded. Lysara stepped forward, but Reflum held out a hand. Heaving a sigh, Reflum admitted, No, in truth, for many deities, it would be a minor inconvenience that wouldn't even be noteworthy. However, Tusidic is a planet where 4 deities are looking to create a new pantheon of their own designs. And if it remains as is, not only will it be a sign of impotence, but could be used against them as signs of being traitors to their current pantheons they serve in. So it's not only about saving face, but saving their skin, Kalain nodded, returning to his seat. The others followed suit, many looking away. Calrin and Reflim stood looking each other in the eyes. Folding their arms across their chest, Reflim explained. So, in an attempt to extend our body's longevity, I will be limiting each of us to one discipline. Several voices cried out at once, anger dancing on each tongue. Some shifted to pleading while others remained in silence. Reflim gestured around the room and sent specific glares before speaking. That won't mean much to those of you who weren't Black Phoenixes before, so I apologize on behalf of my more hot-headed allies. Wira and Kalain, both of them are the power-hungry types. If I may? Lasara smiled widely and cleared her voice. A symbol floated above the table. It started at 4 equidistant points, colored differently. Then straight lines connecting the 4 points were made. A black line ran horizontal, while a white line vertical. Then the lines conjoined at each point and curved through each of the other sections to link each line to 2 others. Finally, a circle closed around the entire shape. The goddess smiled proudly. This is what's known as the Kautem. It is the symbol of myself and my domain, the 4 eternal elements. Okay, that was a very pretty picture you just painted, but what significance is there? Arted scoffed, before picking up his glass to swirl before taking a drink. Lasara giggled behind her hand. Oh, do you need explained? I figured the one Reflim always called a genius would have figured it out with a glance. Now that's just cruel. I had to ruminate and study this for decades to understand it. But you had the general flow of it from the start. You were just a perfectionist in needing to understand the whole thing. Lasara beamed broadly before waving her hand, causing the 4 points to illuminate. The goddess plucked a fruit to roll between her dexterous fingers as she explained. You see, there are 3 parts that make up the Kautem. Associating towards the possible usage of skills in life, there are the 4 elements, earth, air, and water. The image shifted, causing each point to swell and show an image of the element before shrinking back down. Then each of the lines stretched forward. Lasara continued. Then there are the 4 aspects of the living, body, mind, spirit, and soul. As the straight lines shrunk, each of the curved lines around the symbol, stretched and began to swirl with multicolored energy. Lasara nodded. The rest are the 4 expressions of the elements. They are Ki, Chi, Rites, and Pex. Right, and this is how we would classify anything that people would normally lump into magic or miracles. As any of my fellows from the Black Phoenix's original roster can attest, that's usually just people's ignorance admitting they don't understand what they're seeing. Reflim explained as they took a seat. Kicking their feet up, they continued. The problem is that the more you combine the abilities, the greater the toll they take on your body. So, by limiting ourselves to a single element, aspect, or expression, we not only give ourselves a solid foundation to work from in the future, but also shouldn't strain our bodies any more than necessary. Okay, so how are we going to choose? Tishrel asked between bouts of biting her lip. Asriel took her hand and squeezed it reassuringly. Kalain let out a harsh bark before jumping up on the table, a platter of fruit scattering across his ankles. Ignoring the food, he roared, Isn't that obvious? We should fight for it. Let's have a tournament. Winner gets first pick. Not all of us are barbarians slavering at the chance to club one another, Arted scoffed. Diaz ran a hand through his blonde tresses before letting out a sigh. True. So how about this? We split into teams of 3, 1 fighter and 2 supporters. As the paired duel, the assistants offer advice or offer help. That way, there should be at least 4 of us willing to put our skills to the test. Naturally, I'd volunteer for the fight, Kalain boasted. Reflem raised a large cup, adding, "It'd be a good chance to stretch my muscles." "I trust Koshi to represent myself," Wira said, lifting their partner's arm into the air. The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes were looking around for the final participant. Then a single arm raised as Tishrel announced, "If no one else will, I'll fight." "I'll support you," Asriel announced quickly. Mihail strutted over and placed a hand on Tishrel's shoulders. "And I'll be your third." Kalain's fingers landed on Mask and Diaz. He crooned loudly, "Diaz, Mask, request you join your considerable strength to my own." Diaz leaned over as Mask whispered to them. After nodding twice, he announced, "We accept your proposition on the condition that Mask will assign the actual aspects, elements, or expressions to us." "Deal!" Wira elegantly bowed, holding a non-existent dress in his curtsy. He spoke sweetly to Reneth, who had barely looked up from her tome during the whole conversation. "I would be delighted if you'd empower us with your knowledge and my insight, Reneth." Reneth stood with equal pageantry, bowed and offered her hand. As Wira kissed the back of her hand, she gave a playful smile. "And though I may be insufficient to the task, I shall endeavor to give all my all for you and Koshi as your supporter." Arted ran a hand through his white hair and walked up to Reflem. With a sigh, he confirmed, "So that leaves me and Kaurin as your supporters. Should I be worried?" "Hardly. So, should we get started?" No. Reflem flashed a fang-filled smile. Kicking their feet off the table, Reflem announced, "The tournament will begin tomorrow morning after breakfast. So take the rest of today and tonight to plan with your teams. Understood?" "Yes, Commander," every voice except Lassar responded. "Dismissed!" Reflem's voice echoed around the room. Each of the teams departed in a different direction. Tishrel was the first out of the double doors and led into the garden that surrounded the manor. Flowers of endless colors were arranged in neat rows, with more robed figures tending to the plants. Once the door closed behind them, Tishrel curled up and clutched her head. "What did I just do? I'm going to get killed again." Tishrel muttered to herself over and over. Mihail pointed to the curled-up elf as she looked over at Asriel. Does this happen a lot to her?" "Would you believe it? Yes." Asriel smiled and wrapped her arms around Tishrel, guiding the tall woman's head to rest against her chest as she cooed, "It's fine, you're fine. Breathe in, breathe, in and out." Maya sat on the marble steps leading out of the mansion. With a soft laugh, she inquired, "If you're getting weak in the knees, why'd you go and volunteer?" "They were all black phoenixes, living legends, you know." "Yeah, ain't it a reason to not enter the scrap?" "How could I just watch them? The commander is feared by powers that be. Kalain once butchered an entire army looking for the family that disowned him. And Koshi was bodyguard for a literal deity." Tishrel's eyes widened in horror as she rolled to her side. Rocking side to side, she began to mutter, "They're gonna kill me." "Can't make nothing from that." Mihail threw up her arms. Asriel giggled and continued to tease Tishrel's long hair between her soft fingers. Looking over to Mihail, Asriel explained, "As much as a killer, Tishrel considers herself a warrior. So when presented with such a challenging fight, her blood got fired up and she volunteered without thinking it over." Mihail scoffed. "That was her fired up? See more fire in the ocean at night. So then has she got the gist of it? Got the right of it? No chance at a win?" "I wouldn't say that. Kalain is a vicious combatant, and Koshi is as well trained as they get." "And Reflem? They're the wild card. I just know that they're the head of the Black Phoenix, so they should be at least competent in some way." "But Tishrel is an expert duelist. We just need to catch our opponents off guard. That all." Mahale laughed and slapped the steps. Lifting herself up, Mahale cried out, "Hey, Lysara, you heard us, right?" The goddess appeared from a sudden cloud of mist, and she corrected, "It's more than fair to say I'm aware of everything that happens here. Either way, we need a workshop. Got one?" Head into the back garden, and there's a workshop for making and repairing tools. Mahale nudged Tishrol with her long foot, saying, "Come on, quit your mewling. We're going to make you a real contender." Astral laughed softly, helping her lover to her feet. The pair followed Mahale's long strides. Kalain snorted derisively from his seat in his chamber. Mask leaned against a wall as Diaz played with a golden bauble, letting it dance and flow from one hand to the other, swirling a glass of some crimson drink as he looked over his allies. "So, is there a particular result you're looking for?" Diaz asked, as the small ball vanished from one hand to the other. Kalain chuckled darkly. "Soul would be my preference. They're quite the delicacy. Yourself?" "Body, naturally. Given this new lease on life, I'd want to see what I can do with my flesh. How about you, Mask?" Mask stared intently at the door. They held up a hand and announced flatly, "Someone's behind the door." Kalain's eyes narrowed as Mask's lean body leaned forward, each careful step making no sound as they wrapped a gloved hand around the sculpted handle. A short being with the face of a fox held its pawed hands up, about to knock. Mask inquired, "You don't seem to be one of Lysara's servants. Who are you?" Yes. May I come in? I'm here on the offer on the behalf of another deity." The foxman bowed, creasing his white robe. Mask stepped aside and let the much shorter being inside. His small fangs clacked constantly as his head snapped around nervously. Passing a paw over his twitching nose, the foxman introduced himself. "I am Ashi, servant to Tsukiyomi. I have come at their orders to make you an offer, freedom for an act of service, in saving 2 souls." "Oh, and whose souls are we supposed to save?" "By rights, Wira and Koshi should still be in Lady Tsukiyomi's service. We request your assistance in returning them to her," Ashi explained before reaching into their robe. A golden tube rested in their paws as they explained. "During the fight, one of you merely needs to touch Wira with this, and it will transport them to my lady's home." "And what good would this do any of us?" "Likewise, once you've rendered your service, my lady will take you and provide you with all the positions and power befitting your efforts." Ashi reached into their robe once more. This time the fox held out a hilt wrapped in crimson. Wow. Wrapped in crimson fabric. And held it out. "Consider this a token of my lady's generosity, a powerful artifact to assist you." Diaz raised a skeptical eyebrow. "A handle. Are we to throw it?" Mask walked over and silently picked up the hilt. Their nimble fingers caused it to dance and spin before grabbing it with one hand. A blade erupted from the handle, silver in color with a curved edge. Pressing the sharp edge to the side of Ashi's throat, Mask ordered, "Explain." "This is Suryu, a weapon that changes shape to befit those who would wield it. It's a..." Ashi shuddered as the blade brushed the soft fur around his neck. Mask tossed the weapon to Diaz before returning to lean against the wall. As the fox breathed a sigh of relief, Suryu's blade shifted to a simple broadknife. Diaz shook his head slowly. "This weapon is a blessed one. It would be useless if we took it with us." Forgive me." Ashi took several steps towards the door and bowed. Raising their head, "I'm afraid I skipped a message in eagerness to recruit you all. You see, Lady Tsukiyomi believes the venture has run its course, and will not be sending you all to pain and death on that planet. Instead, your capture of Wira will be her last act towards Eighth's failed union. Naturally, she will be taking you all with her on her departure if you agree. Kalain held out a hand to Diaz, who handed over the weapon. The weapon's blade grew thick, blunt and long, jagged edges like broken fangs stuck out from the sides. With a smirk, Kalain looked to his other partners. Each one nodded, and Kalain flicked the heavy weapon around before planting it into the elaborate rug below him. She's got a deal. Ashi bowed and left the tube next to Kalain's bed before departing. Stepping outside the room, the fox hurriedly moved down the hall. Halting in their steps, a voice whispered, "I see you, little one. Run back to your master before I reduce you to embers." Blue flames drifted through the air and surrounded Ashi. A pained yelp escaped the fox as it shrunk down and ran headlong down the stairs. Wira snickered and erupted into laughter, peeking out from Reneth's room. Wira closed the door behind them. With a girlish giggle, Wira mused, "You'd think I'd grow tired of scaring the little ones, but they just make the best expressions." "I can appreciate that as well," Reneth mused without looking up from her book, her feet kicking back and forth as she read. "There's just something about that panic that can be so irresistibly adorable." As Wira picked a book off the shelf, he sat on the bed. The rest of the furniture had been cleared to the sides to give Koshi room to practice his strikes. Koshi inquired as he struck his 40-second kick, "Do we have a particular plan?" Reneth cooed, "I have a few, but it's hard without knowing our opponent. I'm pretty sure Reflum specifically didn't let us know who we're facing, so we couldn't sabotage them." "I mean, we could try and sabotage all three by poisoning them," Wira offered, turning turning a page. With a soft laugh, he added, "Myself, Astral Mask, and Kalrin are all well versed in poison." "You'd have a better chance trying to blow them up or just trap them in a room to make them lose by default." Koshi moved to a chain of punches, countering, "That's pointless. We're in the domain of Lasara. She'll know exactly where you put them." "So, fighting openly is our only option?" Reneth pouted. Wira chuckled. "I didn't say that. We'll just have to be more subtle during the fight." A knock came from the door as Reneth spoke up. "You may enter." All three sets of eyes widened as the door opened. A man stepped inside with sickly pale skin. His dark eyes scanned the room as he shut the door behind him. Excuse me. Koshi and Wira bowed as Wira greeted, "Lord Thanatos, it's nice to see you in person." "You mean again?" The man smiled, revealing his perfect teeth. "This is our second meeting. The first was when those goblins ravaged you." "Ah, right." Wira shivered, and a soft hand rested on his shoulders. Reneth smiled at him softly before turning to the god of death. Undaunted, she looked into Thanatos' gaze. Reneth asked, "What brings you here?" "I have a task for you to fulfill," Thanatos explained bluntly. Resting his hand on the sword hilts, he explained, "My brother and I are looking to be quit of this foolish compact with Lasara. As such, we will be taking some with us and leaving rather than risking yourselves on a suicide mission. I'd have you all become favored of the Chthonic Pantheon." "And how would we do that?" Koshi asked without lifting his head. Thanatos pulled out a needle, roughly as long as his hand, from palm to fingertip. Wrapping it in a cloth, he explained, "Prick the one you know is Mask. During the competition tomorrow, this needle will kill anyone living instantly and will secure your freedom from this foolish task for Lysara. I see. We will consider it. Please leave that tool on the shelf on your way out, Reneth requested. Thanatos left the sheathed needle on the shelf. As he left, he said, I've heard you all were excellent mercenaries. I look forward to seeing you justify the rumors. With a soft click where his knees gave out, Koshi hurried to his side and held him. Muffled sobs escaped, leaving Reneth to sit on the bed, gently stroking a hand through Weir's red locks. After a while, Reneth let out a sigh. Mask wouldn't expect me to try anything, since I'm the weakest one here. So, if we're going to do this, it should be me. True, that would be ideal, if we decide to do this. Weira looked up at the shelf where the needle sat. Biting his lip, Weira looked over at Koshi. What do you think? It means betraying Reflim, but we'd be safe from her. True, but that would be ideal. True, but for now, let's focus on something else. Koshi squeezed Weira against himself. After a moment, he inquired, Reneth, what element, expression, or aspect would you want? Researching rites would be fun. Reneth smiled softly. Returning to her book, she added, I mean, they're usually intricately tied to history of a place, so they can require a lot to understand. And I'm always up for a challenge. Wiping the final tears away on his arm, Weira laughed shakily. You really are a succubus. Those kinds of lines are just spill out of you without thinking about it, huh? Whatever could you mean? Alright, I give up. Weira threw up his hands into the air. Since I can't be more seductive than Reneth, I might as well prove that I'm not as good as you, too. Come on. Weira stood up and walked over to the open area. Both men fell into combat stances, with Weira keeping his body narrow, with both palms extended towards Koshi. Meanwhile, the black-haired man kept both fists raised. No, brown-haired. I always forget that he's a brunette. Koshi led with a flurry of jabs that Weira deflected deftly, knocking each blow off course. Then, sliding under a punch, Weira brought the base of his palm under Koshi's chin. Koshi deftly leaned back into a strong punch that landed on Weira's shoulder, pushing him into the floor. Weira laughed. Definitely made the right choice having you fight, Koshi. You barely lost any steps at all. Arted looked up at the ceiling, clicking his tongue. He muttered, What are they doing up there that's so noisy? Oh, probably sparring. Oh, can you pass me the raison herb? It's the golden one in the jar next to you, Reflim asked as they continued stirring the meat and vegetables in the wide pan. The food sizzled as Reflim cooked, taking up one corner of the kitchen. The opposite corner had Calren deftly cutting up various ingredients. Arted watched the pair cook from a stool near the entrance door. He handed Reflim the ingredient and returned it to the shelf. Calren inquired, So, are we cooking to prevent anyone from poisoning each other? Not really. If I was worried about that, I'd have said so. That'll take care of itself. I'm mostly cooking because I enjoy it, and once we depart, Mask will get pushy about making sure everyone has proper nutrition. Reflim smiled and slid the meat into a pot of stew before quickly adding Calren's prepared materials. Taking the ladle and stirring the pot, they added, One of the few faults I have is that Mask's taste preference are sorely bland. Reflim's finger bounced around the room for a moment, muttering to themselves and then looking at the soup. Their hand snapped to one shelf, hurriedly adding some crushed red spice before nodding. Arted inquired, I assume we're at the step now where everything just needs to cook? Indeed. Excellent, then I hope I won't be disturbing you, a new voice chimed in. As the door to the kitchen swung open, a pale, effeminate man stepped in. Calren and Arted rose to bow deeply. Reflum didn't look up from their soup to confirm. Not at all. Is there something I can help you with, Hypnos? Hypnos took a seat upon Arted's stool. Resting his chin on his hand, the deity inquired. I believe my brother and Tsukiyomi have some plots to betray our alliance with Lasara. As the day and night change, so too do God's plot and scheme. I'm just curious, do you think you'll require any assistance? None more than the only two souls in the room I trust. Hypnos grabbed his chest. That is a cruel chest. Have I ever led you astray? Reflum looked across the room, their silver eyes alighting. You've never had the chance. You're an observer, after all. As sharp and astute as ever. Then, my dear dagger, I wish you all the luck tomorrow, inside the square and without. Hypnos mused and leaped off the stool, departing quickly as they had arrived. Arted looked at the seat and walked over to the kitchen counter. He demanded, What do you need for tomorrow, then? I need you to make one of our old shields. Reflum turned back to the soup. The first bubble rose to the surface, and Reflum nodded. Arted tilted his head. That's it? No special equipment or tricks this time? Calren giggled. You really are forget what working with Reflum is like. Conflicts are won before the soldiers take the field, if you do it right. Oh? And how would you know? Arted asked. Calren giggled behind her dainty, pale hand. I've my sources, though in this case it's mostly a deduction of logic. Like Reflum said, of course the gods have schemes going. The question then becomes, what do they want, and how are they going to get them? I see. Arted grew silent in his musing. Calren finished cutting the final ingredients, offering Arted a strip of crimson pepper that he ate without looking. The soup eventually grew to bubble and boil. Sticking their head out of the kitchen, Reflum beckoned some of the servants, having bowls sent to each of the other groups. The trio sat around the kitchen on stools with their own bowls. Calren sighed happily as Arted sputtered, Might be a bit too spicy for me. I'll cut back next time for your bowl. Calren smiled. Make mine hotter the next time. I love it when it gives me a good sweat. Is it being spicy a dragon thing, then? Arted wondered aloud. To be honest, I find it varies person to person, even within the same species. Reflum shrugged. Between slurps, they added, I've known dragons who could subsist on rocks with no complaints, and others who would never ingest anything without some garnish. Same goes for Tiari, Fae, Elves, Drow, Kitsune, Oni, Jinni, and any other race. I once knew a vampire who would feed his prey this one exact meal before he'd feed on them. He mustn't have eaten very often, Calren giggled. Actually, he had people lining up to offer him their blood. It was seasoned boar stew that was supposedly really tasty. I mean, who turns down a free meal? Even if you're dinner afterwards. Reflum shrugged. Well, thank you for the food. I'm going to go back to my room and work on the shield for tomorrow. Anything else you require? Arted announced before finishing roughly half his bowl. Reflum shook their head. Nothing at all, other than you two to have a nice night and get some rest. It is truly wonderful to be back in the employ of a reasonable being. Till tomorrow, then. Arted nodded and departed the room. Calren finished her last spoonful, musing. I can never tell how much of his speech is sarcasm or him being guilelessly honest. Mostly the latter. The former is reserved for when someone actually upsets him. Still, he did grow up as a noble in the capital of the Drow Empire, so he's not socially inept. He just finds the games dull and removed himself from having to play them. Reflum smiled and placed a lid on the pot, the fire having burned down to embers. Then, tangling their hands, Reflum inquired, Now, honestly, how are you holding up, Calren? I'll be all right. Just this new body feels too small and fragile. I resent being forced into something inadequate after my long wait. Cowrin gave an exaggerated pout before gaining a Cheshire grin. Leaning in, she kissed Reflem and murmured, "But it'll be worth it once this job is over. Yes, and as much as I want to play tonight, let's turn in and truly rest. If things go wrong, tomorrow could become a very long day." Reflem returned to the kiss. Both lovers depart to their private bedrooms. Both spent lingering glances at each other as Cowrin reached her room first. Thus, the quiet night vanished with every tick of the clock. I think we'll leave it there for tonight. The first 2 chapters I managed to get through. So I didn't get any writing done tonight, but I got you all up to speed. And, well, you figure, got you to what? Pages. First half, 27 pages. Yeah, out of the 31. Reading aloud, I think that's pretty good. So, I want to thank you all for joining me. It's for something a little different. So, thank you all, and I'll see you next time on this, or maybe something else. So, I'll see you later. Bye for now, folks. Bye for now.